The first European race of the season comes to you from the Hockenheimring, located deep within the Heidelberg Forest. As you can see on the top right, it's a different procedure because once the red light goes out, on goes the green light. And a great start from second on the grid is Kimi Räikkönen as he pulls up alongside Takuma Sato going into the first corner. Button also had a good start from third on the grid, but let's see the outboard shot. There it is. And look at that debris coming off one of the Toro Rossos. That's one of the rear wings gone. Now, is that Paul Di Resta? He'd started higher up than Daniel Ricciardo on the grid, and that would be an absolute shame if he's lost his rear wing. But look at this, down the mile-long straight into the Jim Clark chicane. We'll be in quite a while, and it does tend to be quite an eventful first chicane. Let's see at the front. All clean so far. No, it's not. I spoke too soon. Who is that has lost more parts of their car? We're looking at an overhead shot of Jules Bianchi. Does he still have a rear wing, or is his rear wing gone? It might well have disappeared. So, who on earth hit Jules Bianchi going into the Jim Clark chicane? Christian Albers could be a culprit because he's out of the race, seemingly with at least one or two missing wheels. But up at the front, we've got Takuma Sato. In fact, look at that. And is that a Ferrari off as well? It's quite tricky to see, but we are concentrating on Christian Albers, stranded backwards at the Jim Clark chicane. I think it is a Toro Rosso, and it does have a rear wing, does it? No, it doesn't, so that must be Paul Di Resta. Okay, so let's focus a bit more on the front, because we've got Takuma Sato in the lead from Matthias Lauda. So both Hondas running first and second. And it's Paul Di Resta, so no rear wing and no front right wheel, so that is unfortunate for the Toro Rosso. Third at the moment is Juan Pablo Montoya. Now he'd started fourth on the grid with a very, very good qualifying effort in the BMW Sauber, and he's done quite well at the start because he's up to third. And we've got the two Toyotas running fourth and fifth. It's Jenson Button from Mark Webber. And then sixth, it's Sergio Perez, who's made a pretty good start, and a poor start in the end for Kimi Räikkönen because, well, he's just overtaken Perez for sixth place going through the Nord curve. But further up, that's Montoya under pressure from Jenson Button going down the long straight into the Jim Clark chicane. Still got yellow flags out, so they're still trying to clear away it's the Force India of Christian Albers, but look at that, side by side pretty much into the Jim Clark. And Jenson Button taking third place. Now Montoya is under pressure, and there's a Ferrari off in the background, just about saw there. Is that Perez? No, it's not. It's Timo Glock who's had an incident going through the Jim Clark. Okay, so Jules Bianchi making pit stop for repair, as is Daniel Ricciardo. So in fact, both Toro Rossos were involved in incidents on the first lap. And Glock rejoining, so that's all okay for the Ferrari driver, who did score some points last time out at the Malaysian Grand Prix, with sixth place, and both Ferraris in the top 7 because Perez was 7th. So not a bad day for Ferrari that time out, as into the Jim Clark chicane goes Jules Bianchi, and then behind is the Toro Rosso, the one remaining Toro Rosso Ricciardo, as through the Senna chicane goes one of the Red Bulls, that's Sebastian Vettel, who is in 9th place, behind Nick Heidfeld in 8th. And look, two Toyotas side by side, both have now gotten ahead of Juan Pablo Montoya on this lap. And it's Jenson Button who was either defending from Mark Webber or attacking Mark Webber for third. I think he was attacking Webber for third because Webber did briefly move up into that position, but it's been retaken by the Brit, Jenson Button. So, through the final couple of corners, the sub-curve, that's the Superaguri of Felipe Massa we're looking at in 10th place at the moment for the Superaguri as he chases Sebastian Vettel for 9th. And behind he has got Sergio Perez, who's dropped a bit down the order since the previous lap. Was briefly running in 6th place, now down to 11th. So obviously been caught up somewhere in someone's maybe attack. Probably Kimi Räikkönen's attack going into the North curve and then being shuffled out a little bit. So let's see some more action. So Fernando Alonso locking his tyre up going into the Jim Clark chicane as he tries to chase Sergio Perez for 11th place, and behind that's Adrian Sutil in the other Force India because Albers is out of the race now as they approach the Ost curve. Which variant of the Ost curve are they using? And it's the 1992 variant of the Ost curve because you brake hard into a tight right, then go into the left and then sweep round to the right for the remainder of the Ost curve. So that's the layout we are running, unless it might be 1994 because if we go into the Senna chicane, they are running the tighter variant. It is in fact the 94 layout, but with 1992 curbs, interestingly. As we focus on, there was that Kimi Raikkonen in 7th place. He's been passed by Hamilton, and is he being passed by Nick Heidfeld? Yes, he is. Is that Kimi Raikkonen with an issue? Well, there's yellow flags out somewhere. So, has there been another instance? Yes, there has been. It's Kamui. No, it's not. It's Adrian Sutil in the Force India who has pulled off. Is that mechanical, or is that an incident for the German? As we look at Glock going off the circuit, and Sutil is in fact out of the race with a transmission failure. So, Adrian Sutil suffering a mechanical issue, and both Force Indias out within the first 4 laps. That is dreadful luck for the Indian team. Meanwhile, Timo Glock had rejoined the circuit after his little escapade at the first corner going into the stadium. Used to refer that as the Ajib curve. Now, looking at the timing screen, Webber has retaken 3rd off of Jenson Button. And I think Raikkonen has retaken Nick Heidfeld for 7th, so Raikkonen did look as if he was dropping back a little bit. He's now retaken that. So, Sato from Lauda from the 2 Toyotas, Webber, Button 3rd and 4th. Montoya still holding on to 5th, but Hamilton is closing up to the Colombian. And that's Heidfeld versus Raikkonen continuing their battle for 7th place, as Alonso has a monster lockup going into the Ost curve. And there's a Renault chasing the Spaniard as well, exiting the Ost curve. And let's see, any more position changes? Well, I think Vettel and Massa are having a battle for 9th place. And has there been an incident at the third Senna chicane? It's Webber. Webber's had a spin at the Senna chicane. Has there been contact between himself and Jenson Button for 3rd, I wonder? Now, wouldn't that be an interesting debrief for the Toyota team, as Webber, well, rejoins from one side of the grass to the other side of the grass, now back onto the circuit, and Webber has dropped down to 16th place behind Nico Hülkenberg. That is Hülkenberg going into the stadium. Meanwhile, I think Perez has dropped down to 11th behind Massa and Alonso. Well, there's Massa having a lockup going into the first sud curve. No problems for Felipe. Well, a little bit of a problem for Fernando Alonso as he exits. No, it is Massa still exiting the sud curve, and Alonso's got ahead as well. So a little mistake there. Now Hamilton, is he dropping back? He is dropping back. Whereabouts is Lewis Hamilton? He's in 7th. He's still going, so Hamilton having a bit of an excursion by the looks of it, going through the Nord curve. And that's helped Montoya a little bit. He's still in 4th. Heidfeld 5th, and we've got Kimi Raikkonen in 6th place now. So Hamilton dropping down to 7th, and is the track getting a bit damp, I wonder, because it's changing colour going through the Ost curve. Let's keep a close eye on see if there's any rain falling. And you can see a bit of change of colour in the tarmac there, so I think rain is on its way. As Alonso goes through the Ost curve, and out of the Ost curve goes Alonso on his Pirelli Shod dry tyres, with the 4 grooves cut into each tyre. And Hamilton has retaken Kimi Raikkonen for 6th place. I think that's probably going into the Senna chicane, as Alonso is going through that very corner now. And further down, Barrichello is having a good race. He's up in 10th place for the Renault team, who is pretty clear that they're not qualifying very well for the races. But Barrichello moving up past that driver we're on board with there, Sergio Perez, and Perez was actually being pressured by... who was it? It was... I can't remember now. It must have been the Superguri Felipe Massa going into the stadium. And oh, goodness me, Alonso off the circuit. Is he going to make the barrier? Not quite. Alonso having a mistake going into the sud curve. Just making it as far as the gravel trap, but he'll rejoin once he courteously lets all drivers through. And looking further at Montoya's dropping down the order as well. So is it getting a bit slippery, or is Montoya being bullied a little bit? He needs a bit of a boost, as Montoya got a 10th place at Sepang last time out, as Ricciardo struggling with his brakes and a bit of oversteer maybe going through the Sachs curve. I should probably recap the Malaysian Grand Prix, but seems as if we've had quite a bit of action. I've not had chance to. So, last time out at Sepang saw Mark Webber take a very dominant victory for the Toyota team. Second was Takuma Sato, third was Kimi Raikkonen, And look at the spray coming out of Jenson Button, who, by the way, retired from the Malaysian Grand Prix with a mechanical problem. His gearbox or suspension immediately after the pit stop. And it's getting a bit wetter at Hockenheim now, as Heidfeld having a tremendous race for the Williams team, up in 4th place. I'll have to double check to see where he started, but it's certainly not been qualifying as well as he hoped, certainly not at Sepang, but going quite well for him at Hockenheim so far, in front of his home crowd. Exactly going through the stadium corner, I think he's going to turn hard left into the Sachs. He was indeed. Takuma Sato, 2nd last time out at Sepang. And then Nico Hulkenberg, my driver of not just the race, but of the entire weekend at Sepang as well, because he'd qualified brilliantly in 7th on the harder compound tyres, and then utilised that to good effect to finish 4th, so that was a sterling effort from Hulkenberg. 5th was Lewis Hamilton. Then, as mentioned before, the 2 Ferraris in 6th and 7th, with Glock ahead of Perez, and Glock did that despite a very, very heavy fuel load, a very heavy one-stop strategy. But it paid off for him in the end. And who on earth finished 8th, 9th and 10th? 10th was Montoya, that we know. And I think Suttil was in 9th place, and then I'll have another look to see who finished 8th, but it could have been better. We'll double check that further. We are on board with Nico Hulkenberg, who is in 13th place, chasing Felipe Massa, and I think Hulkenberg had made a move on another driver. But in any case, so chasing Massa. Now we look at Takuma Sato going through the Ayrton Senna chicane. And then coming out of the Ayrton Senna chicane is Takuma Sato, as we switch back to Nico Hulkenberg, having a look at the inside of Felipe Massa going into the Ost curve, but not making it that one stick. Now Massa, well, he's up into 11th, so Massa himself might have just made a move on the Ferrari of Perez in front of him. We will just double check that though. But in the meantime, there's Jenson Button in 3rd place. Behind Button is Nick Heidfeld, and Button quite comfortable in 3rd as he goes into the stadium curve. It says Opel on the outside, as now Hulkenberg's dropped to 14th position behind Kamui Kobayashi. So Hulkenberg not having a great lap despite overtaking somebody going into the Jim Clark chicane. And that's a bit of a wide line for Perez going into the Ajit curve. But he's holding on to that one. Now into the Sachs curve, the left. Behind him is Kamui Kobayashi. And this could be a battle for, what position is it? Yellow flags as Montoya had an off. Well, Perez is having an off himself. That's the Sud curve. It's getting very, very slippery out there, and Montoya crashing out of the race. So Montoya is good qualifying position, all for naught, as he crashes out on lap number, his 7th lap I think that was. You can see it getting wetter now as we look at Alonso going through the Sud curve. And Raikkonen not having a good race at all. He's just been passed by Rubens Barrichello for 7th, going into, that's probably going into the Nord curve. So both Renaults having a tremendous race at the moment. Barrichello 7th, Kubica up to 9th as the rain continues to fall down, but nobody thinking about intermediate tyres just yet. And it's looking quite comfortable for the 2 Hondas at the front, Sato and Lauda. There goes Jenson Button in 3rd place, and Heidfeld some 3.3 seconds behind the Toyota driver. Hamilton in 5th place, 2 seconds behind Nick Heidfeld. And then Vettel up to 6th place. Not too bad an effort for the Red Bull driver. So Vettel actually finished 9th at Sepang last time out, behind the 3-stopping Adrian Suttil. It was a curious strategy from the Force India driver, but it seemed to work out just about in the end. And some useful points for the Force India, who do seem to be dropping back a little bit after their brilliant win at Adelaide. Maybe they need to use some tokens after the 6th race of the season, which will be the Monaco Grand Prix. Nobody making a pit stop just yet, but going into the Nord curve is Jenson Button. Still quite dry as he exits the Nord curve, as Kobayashi goes way wide at the Sud curve, and into the gravel trap goes the McLaren driver. Now can he rejoin? Looks as if he will do, but he's going to have to wait, because there might be some cars making their way through the field. So a costly mistake for Kobayashi, who had his first mechanically related retirement last time out at Sepang. and it was an engine failure in the back of the McLaren. So BMW going pop as off the track briefly goes Timo Glock, but it wasn't a major off, just a small one, as he is now being chased by the Super Aguri. Now, is that Felipe Massa or is it Fernando Alonso? I think it's Alonso who had that. No, it is Felipe Massa actually. It isn't Felipe Massa, it's Fernando Alonso. Just having another look at the timing screens. So Alonso recovering. His target is Timo Glock. So through the Ayrton Senna chicane, that is Matthias Lauda we're looking at. Now, could he get his first career podium? That'll be some achievement for the Austrian, who has basically spent his entire career in the shadow of Takuma Sato. But now that he has got a car which appears to be very good in a straight line, qualified quite well, and now he's up in second, so it'd be good to see him get a podium. As we have a look at Rubens Barrichello, that's challenging Sebastian Vettel for 6th place, so Barrichello in the Renault absolutely flying at the moment. He does love the wet weather, but he's been pretty quick in this race so far, which, now, could that suggest a 2-stop strategy, or maybe a 1-stop strategy? Well, if it keeps raining, that'll throw any fuel strategy out of the window if you have to change onto intermediate tyres. But still, nobody going for the intermediates at this stage of the race, even though you can clearly see spray coming out of the back of the Honda of Takuma Sato there. Sergio Perez turning into the first corner of the stadium. Off the track goes Perez, and spinning into the gravel trap goes Sergio Perez. Yellow flags out because of the hazard on the outside of the track. And can Perez rejoin? Well, he's certainly kept it running. Now he's going to do a little quick spin, and back onto the circuit goes the Ferrari of Sergio Perez. But no doubt that'll cost him a bit of time. Into the Ost curve, that's Matthias Lauda. And then hitting the apexes quite well, and out of the Ost curve goes the Honda of Matthias Lauda. Now he has got Jenson Button closing in on him because the gap has gone down over the past few laps. It is now 3.7 seconds. That is Kimi Raikkonen running in 8th place behind Sebastian Vettel, but still not having the greatest of races is Raikkonen. Did use these soft tyres for qualifying, so that could explain his lack of pace in this race so far, although he has been caught up in traffic quite a bit. And I do know that BMW Sauber also running these soft tyres for this race as well. On board, with a driver going through the Ajit curve and now into the Sachs curve, which is a nicely cambered hairpin left, nearly 180 degrees but not quite. Now a little pit path before the Sud curves. Turn right, bit of a dip as you hit the first apex, but coming out of the second apex, it's quite flowing as you go into the start-finish straight. Got widened for the 1990 season after it was a bit narrow in 1989. There they sorted that out for the following season. But of course this part of the circuit, or in fact not this part that Felipe Massa is, well, he's running a bit wide, so that is it's a bit of a clumsy one for Massa. Is that in fact a mechanical issue for the Brazilian, or was that just a mistake going through what looks like the Sud curves? Yeah, it looks like a mistake for Massa. Now that's moved Nico Hulkenberg up into 11th place. And 10th place is Mark Webber, so he has recovered. And back into the points goes the championship leader. Leads the championship by a single point from that driver there, his own teammate, Jenson Button. And third in the championship, I believe it is Kimi Raikkonen, but I will have to double check that. It is Kimi Raikkonen on 45 points, just 6 behind Mark Webber, and fourth in the championship, race leader Takuma Sato. And if it stays like this, he'd be retaking the championship lead just about, I think. No, he wouldn't actually, because he would end up tied with Jenson Button. But still quite a bit of this race to go. Some 34 laps. Shorter race than normal because you've got a high average speed, but they still do roughly 305 kilometres minimum. And on this 6.8 kilometre circuit, times that by 45, you get the minimum race distance of 305 kilometres. And at this moment we have hit pretty much 1/4 distance, lap 12 out of 45, so just after 1/4 distance, and Takuma Sato leads by well over 12 seconds. That's basically a second a lap he has pulled over Matthias Lauda. Well, it's now 13.1 seconds, And I think that was them crossing the first sector point going into the Jim Clark chicane. Now Jenson Button is 2.1 seconds behind Matthias Lauda. Give it another 3, 4, maybe 5 laps and he'll have caught up to the Austrian. As into the first corner, that is Kimi Räikkönen. And he is in between Vettel and Robert Kubica. Both Renaults in the top 9, that's a good effort from them. Especially as they qualified 19th and 22nd. Barrichello was last on the grid. So yeah, it is a tremendous effort from the Brazilian on what is a very slippery circuit. And is Alonso going to prove that? Well, missed the apex a little bit at the Nord curve, but managing to stay onto the circuit. Now he has got, who is that behind him? Is that Ferrari? It is a Ferrari, and I think it's the Ferrari of Timo Glock making his way up into 13th place, ahead of the Super Aguri driver, into the Jim Clark chicane, and now we switch to the Ajip curve going into the stadium, Takuma Sato. And he's still pulling out a big lead over Matthias Lauda. He's now 13.8 seconds. Is that crossing his second sector point, I think it was, as Alonso retakes Timo Glock going into the Ost curve. That's for 13th place. As exiting the Ost curve goes the Spaniard, and you can see the track still getting wetter, but still nobody wants to take on some new wet tyres. They all seem quite happy on these groove tyres, which are providing a surprisingly high amount of grip on this very wet track. Makes me wonder actually if there's only one type of wet tyre available for this meeting. Maybe the full wet is the only one that's available. That'd be a curious little development. But there's Lauda, and there's Button behind. 1 second is the gap between the two. Maybe Lauda missed the apex slightly going through the second sud curve. And how far back is Heidfeld? He's 6 seconds behind Jenson Button. And Heidfeld might have Hamilton all over his gearbox in the next few laps or so. The gap between those two is just 1.5 seconds as Räikkönen takes Vettel. Is that going into the Jim Clark chicane? Well, doesn't even need to wait for the braking zone. He's got ahead on slipstream alone. And is that yet another mistake from Alonso going through the Nord curve? That's 2 laps in a row at least he's done that. Is that going to hand another opportunity to Timo Glock? Well, Glock's not close enough just yet, but faint whiff of a slipstream, he could be in with a chance in the next few straights. Jenson Button versus Matthias Lauda. Actually, it might have been Felipe Massa that has been chased by Timo Glock. Certainly one of the Super Aguris anyway. And it's just 3/4 of a second, the gap between Lauda and Button going into the Ajip curve. And I think it's 1.3 seconds now, the gap between Heidfeld and Hamilton. So that is definitely closing. We could be seeing a battle for 4th place in the next few laps. And through the North curve goes Takuma Sato onto the long straight. See the trees on the left and the right hand side. It's like threading the forest needle at 200 miles an hour. And a random dry patch as they cross the first sector point. And here comes the attack. Jenson Button versus Matthias Lauda. Button on the inside on the long straight. It'll become the inside line for the Jim Clark chicane. And it's still side by side, and again that random dry patch, it seems to be getting a bit bigger, so maybe the rain has eased off a little bit and that these drivers can hang on these grooved tyres. There is definitely a dry line emerging at the Ost curve, so yes, staying out does seem to have been the right option in the end. More of a dry patch. Now onto the slightly wetter stuff as he approaches the Ayrton Senna chicane. And Vettel has lost another position, this time to Robert Kubica. Kubica up into 8th place. So Renault's once again showing quite well in the wet conditions, because now we've got Barrichello in 6th and Kubica in 8th. And from the back of the grid, that is a tremendous effort. Staying out of the chaos, of course. And now you can see much more of a dry line going into the Ayrton Senna chicane. So, exiting the Ost curve, that is Kubica, the new 8th place driver. Makes me wonder if they've taken the harder compounder tyres. It certainly wouldn't have done them any good in the wetter part of the race. But as it dries up a little bit, it could do them quite a bit of good. But it could just be that the Pirellis on the Renaults are working very well in the wet conditions. We've now hit 1/3 distance, lap 15 out of 45, and it is still Takuma Sato, who has now got Jenson Button in second place. And the gap is 15.5 seconds. So Button gaining 3/10 in that final sector. And Lauda 1.4 seconds behind Jenson, as he could well be dropping back a little bit from the Toyota driver. The Toyota is a very, very good race car. Button's demonstrating that with second, and Webber demonstrating that in his own unique way, in the form of a recovery drive. Was backwards at the Ayrton Senna chicane in the opening laps, possibly from contact with his own teammate, but we never saw that, so let's pretend that it never happened and that Webber just spun off on his own. But he is back up to 10th place at the moment, and is only a second or so behind Sebastian Vettel. In fact, it's pretty much a second. Vettel losing time now as he's dropping back from Robert Kubica, and is going to be in the clutches of Mark Webber within the next lap or so. Nico Hülkenberg in 11th place for the BMW Sauber, the only BMW Sauber remaining in this race because Montoya crashed out at the Sud curves. And he was very nearly followed into that by another driver. Was that Kobayashi or was that Alonso? Certainly a car with red on it. Now, which corner is Takuma Sato going through? Is that the Sud curve? I think it is. There's the grid hatching, so starting another lap is Sato, and as the track gets ever drier, lap 16 through the Nord curve. Now, they're expecting one-stops to be a one-stop strategy to be the main one for this particular race because average speeds are very high, and there's a lot. Oh, off the circuit goes Heidfeld. Out of the race goes Nick Heidfeld from 4th place. That's obviously being caught out on the slippery circuit, but a critical error there from Nick Heidfeld back when points were well and truly on the cards for the Williams team. So, unfortunate there. And that moves Lewis Hamilton up into 4th place, and 5th place will go Rubens Barrichello in the Renault. And 6th now is Kimi Raikkonen, 7th is Kubica, 8th Vettel, Webber moves up to 9th, and Nico Hülkenberg up to the points in 10th place. And 11th is Felipe Massa. So maybe Super Gurley could get some points if the attrition rate gets a little bit higher, but he will need a bit of fortunes because, well, Massa has had a bit of a tricky race so far. Points would be a welcome tonic for the Super Gurley team. Vettel under pressure from Webber, that's going on the straight approaching the Ost curve, and Webber's already got it before they even reach the braking zone. So that Toyota's got some good straight line speed. But another team that's got good straight line speed is Honda. Sato, the gap between himself and Jenson Button, 16.3 seconds, so the gap is extending a little bit, so Sato looking good at this very moment. Yet to score a win this season, they've had 4 races, 3 of them have been won by Toyotas, 2 for Button and 1 for Webber, and the other one was won by Adrian Sutil in the Force India, and that was at Adelaide. So it'll be a welcome boost for Sato if he wins this race. And it'll be an even further welcome boost if Lauda remains 3rd. And how far is he ahead of Hamilton? It's 6.6 seconds, so he's fairly comfortable in 3rd place at the moment. And what other action might be happening within the top 10? Well, the gap is still quite close between Webber and Vettel for 8th place, but I would expect Webber to pull away. Yeah, he's pulled out 4/10 in a sector of the lap, probably the final sector. So the gap between himself and Vettel, 1.1 seconds. And now Webber's next target is Robert Kubica, and that's way off the track at the Nord curve, tapping the wall with his rear wheel, but he's gotten away with it. He has the chance to rejoin, but how long will he have to wait? Well, he's paused at the moment, as through goes the other Super Gurley of Alonso, and then the Ferrari of Timo Glock and the McLaren of Kamui Kobayashi. So Massa doing a very lazy turning circle, and rejoins right into the path of Jules Bianchi. That could have been a bit dangerous. but Bianchi saw that one coming and he's rocketed past Massa onto the straight approaching the Jim Clark chicane. So Bianchi up to 15th place. And what else is happening? Sato. Well, he's going through the sud curve and starting another lap, so no interest in making a pit stop as of this moment. And still the lead builds, 16.4 seconds as he goes through the north curve. So Toro Rosso up into 14th place, and it is Daniel Ricciardo had to pit at the end of the first lap due to damage going through. It could well have been the second chicane, or could be the first chicane, Jim Clark, because we did see Paul Di Resta losing his rear wing and then his front right tyre. There might well have been a pinball effect going into the Jim Clark chicane, and the main victims from that would have been Christian Albers and Paul Di Resta. And then a few other retirements that happened. Adrian Sutil suffering a transmission failure. Could well have been a gearbox problem, although he did clump the curbs a bit in the 3 chicanes. And off the track, that's Bianchi going off the track, spinning at the Ajip curve. But he's got his rear wheel spinning and he can rejoin the circuit once he knows where he's going. Where does he think he is? Nürburgring? Well, he's now located where the circuit is and he's going to rejoin. So Williams having a bit of a tricky one because Heidfeld is another retirement of the race, crashing out at the sud curve, as was Juan Pablo Montoya. And who else is retired from the race? I think that might be... well, there might be a few more, but let's concentrate on the action at this moment. That is the stranded Adrian Sutil that you can see at the exit of the Ayrton Senna chicane. As into the Ajip curve goes second place Jenson Button. And he's 5.6 seconds ahead of Matthias Lauda. So, he really is pulling out the gap and doing pretty much whatever he can to try and close in on Takuma Sato, race leader, but Sato's got quite a big lead over the Toyota driver, 16.5 seconds. So it'll take some sort of miracle if Button is going to take his 3rd win of the season. But if it does stay like this, Button will retake the championship lead from Martin Webber, who is of course out of the... well, he's out of contention pretty much for a win, but he's still in 8th place at the moment. But the gap between the 2 Toyota drivers, just a single point. What the gap's now? Well, it's 16.3 seconds, so Button just about starting to catch Sato, but he needs a lot more than that if he's going to take the win. And this, of course, would be Sato's first race win of the season, because the last one... when did he last win, actually? It was quite a while ago. Might have been the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring last season. But there might have been a later race. That's through the heavily cambered Ost curve. And who is it we're on board with? Could well be Jenson Button. And look further back. Where is Matthias Lauda? That is a big gap. There's a very, very faint pixel you can just about see, and that is Matthias Lauda. Lauda's got about 4.8 seconds over 4th place Lewis Hamilton. And Rubens Barrichello in 5th place, 3.3 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. 3.1 actually, so Barrichello closing in a little bit on the Red Bull driver. And Kimi Raikkonen has made some semblance of his race after a poor start, or poor opening couple of laps for the McLaren driver, and he sits in 6th place, but Mark Webber is catching up to the McLaren driver. As Kubica versus Webber, is that? And off the track goes Kubica, and bang into the wall, and off goes his front nose. So that is a costly mistake for Kubica. Now it actually... Webber was actually making a move on Kubica, going at some point into the... earlier in the lap actually, because Kubica might have been having a go back at the Toyota driver, but pushing a bit too hard on the damp circuit, and that's cost Kubica. So he'll have to make a pit stop now, and that's moved Webber up to 7th, that's moved Vettel up to 8th, Hulkenberg up to 9th, and that will put Alonso into the points. That'll be 10th place. Massa, he's going to go off the track as well. Big spin at the Ajip curve, but not making it anything like as far as Kubica. That's, in some ways, is impressive from the Renault driver, but Massa's waiting because who on earth is going past? That's Sergio Perez going past. So we've now got both Ferraris 11th and 12th. That was Bianchi going through in 13th place. So Massa has dropped down to 14th, thanks to that spin at the Ajit curve. Look at this kerfuffle. Kobayashi versus... That's a Ferrari and another Super Aguri driver. Glock up to 10th place, Kobayashi 11th. That's ahead of Fernando Alonso. As through the Sud curve goes Takuma Sato and starting another lap. Lap 21. That's Sergio Perez, and that's Kubica having made his pit stop for a new front wing, rejoining right behind the Mexican. Now, is Kubica going to retaliate? Well, he's tried to, but not quite yet. Now, is he going to do it into the Ost curve? We're looking at the side on camera. Now, if he has got a run, you should see him pull out to the right-hand side of the circuit and make that move on Sergio Perez, but he might not well be close enough. Mark Webber locking up at the Sud curve, just about hanging on to that one. So he's pushing hard to try and catch up to 6th place Kimi Raikkonen as he starts his 21st lap. Still a bit of spray, but fundamentally the circuit is drying up through the Nord curve. That's Mark Webber, chasing Kimi Raikkonen still. 1.5 seconds is the gap between those two. And just in the background, that was one of the many Germans in this race, Sebastian Vettel. In fact, Vettel is the highest placed German in the race, in 8th place. Hulkenberg and Glock next up, 9th and 10th. So 3 Germans in the top 10, but in the pretty much lower reaches of the top 10. Kobayashi in 11th place, 1.1 seconds behind Timo Glock, and Glock is some 10 odd seconds behind. But here comes Fernando Alonso, challenging Kamui Kobayashi down the main straight into the Jim Clark chicane, and still side by side. Now, who's going to be latest on the brakes? I'd expect it to be Alonso. And yes, I think Alonso has maintained that position. As Jenson Button goes into the Ajit curve, followed by 3rd place driver, there you can see him, Matthias Lauda. And he's 4 seconds ahead of Lewis Hamilton. 4 seconds exactly, so Hamilton is closing in a little bit on Matthias Lauda, and he can sniff a podium if the race pans out as planned for the Red Bull, as that was missing the apex going into the Ajit curve for Kimi Raikkonen actually. It's Kimi Raikkonen. That's exiting the Sachs curve. And he's got Webber right behind him, just 7/10 as they cross the second sector point. So maybe at some point on the next long straight, you should be seeing Mark Webber make a move on Kimi Raikkonen. As Hulkenberg pushes hard at the sub curve, locking up and hanging onto the circuit. And he's in 9th place. He's just 2.3 seconds behind Sebastian Vettel. So Hulkenberg not having a bad run, as Webber has passed Kimi Raikkonen for 6th place. And that was down the straight approaching the Jim Clark chicane. And the gap just a 10th, so Raikkonen's still behind. He could still make something out of the slipstream. As Sato, I think that was exiting the Ayrton Senna chicane. And that just shows you how far ahead he is, ahead of those 2 drivers there. Raikkonen having to go back at Webber going into the Ost curve. Now is Raikkonen going to be brave on the brakes? Yes he is, and I think it is raining again, as you can see spray coming out of the back of the cars at the Ost curve. That's pretty much where the rain's coming from. It's starting at the Ost curve and then making its way down south. Quite unusual actually, you'd expect it to be the other way with the way the circuit is situated. The Sud curve is called that because it does sit at the southernmost part of the circuit. And then the Nord curve, well that's basically the north of the main straight. Webber versus Raikkonen once again going into the Ajit curve, and I think Webber's going to make this one stick unless Raikkonen bombs it round the outside, which he doesn't do, and Webber retaking that 6th place. And I'm pretty sure he'll make that one stick because the Toyota is a bit of a better race car. Into the pits comes Rubens Barrichello for his pit stop. We are pretty much at half distance, so that's one-stop strategies expected all around. Webber's into the pits as well, so that'll help Kimi Raikkonen if he's got less fuel on board the McLaren than the Toyota, and if he can utilise that, then he might retake that position away from Mark Webber. Look at the spray coming out of the tyres of Jenson Button as I think this is approaching the next curve. That's the right, then that's the left, and then the sweep right. as he is now 17.7 seconds behind Takuma Sato. I think there's another driver making a pit stop. I think Hulkenberg was into the pits as well, as he's dropped down the order, as Webber rejoins from his pit stop. There he is in 11th, but just ahead of a Toro Rosso of Daniel Ricciardo, and Ricciardo sweeps ahead using the momentum, and now in the background is Nico Hulkenberg having rejoined from his own pit stop. No such pit activity from Takuma Sato at the moment, and if this rain does fall, and if it does spread across the circuit, and if it does get a lot heavier within the next lap or so, then that could benefit Takuma Sato greatly, and it could hinder Mark Webber quite badly, because he would have to come in for another pit stop to change onto wet tyres. And it's nearly 18 seconds now, the gap between Sato and Button, and the rain is definitely spreading, because it's now at the Jim Clark chicane. Anybody else making the pit stop? Well, certainly not the top two. Well, somebody is exiting the pits. I think that's the Williams of Jules Bianchi exiting the pits. And he is a lap down now on Sato and Button. First sector point is at the approach of the Jim Clark chicane. Very short sector consisting of just one corner. And Sato making a right meal of lapping the Super Guri. As here is Jenson Button going into the Ost curve now, and taking it quite gingerly because it is raining again. Out of the Ost curve goes the Toyota driver. He has got a comfortable lead over Matthias Lauda, 10 seconds plus on the Austrian, as getting it well onto the curb, going through the Nord curve is Glock, and he's been passed by the Super Aguri there of Fernando Alonso, and I think about to be passed by Kobayashi as well. And look at that, is that slipstream for Timo Glock? He's just powered straight back ahead. Is he going to make a move on Fernando Alonso, I wonder? Well, he wrenched the wheel. I thought there might have been contact, but nope. And Alonso holding on to what is 8th place at the moment, but pit stops are underway. Speaking of which, Sato is into the pits for his pit stop. Now, is he going to take on some wets, or is he going to remain on the grooved dry tyres? Look at that, swapping in places and positions on the track is Glock and Alonso as they continue a fierce battle. And Jenson Button briefly takes the lead as he goes into the North curve because Sato is in the middle of his pit stop. And ultimately Glock ahead of Alonso now. But look at this, Alonso back ahead of Glock, so the two battling away nicely. And Kobayashi could try and benefit from this. He's going to try and take some slipstream, as Sato rejoined in 3rd place behind his teammate. As we have a look at, well, that's Hamilton getting ahead of Sato. That's momentum from the pit exit, as Jenson Button is approaching the Ost curve. And oh, Hamilton spinning. Has that been contact between himself and Takuma Sato, I wonder? Because that spin looked as if it was happening quite early. So I suspect Sato might have tagged the Red Bull driver into a spin at the Jim Clark chicane. And Hamilton's making a bit of a mess of rejoining, but he's finally done so. Well, he's still on the grass, so what on earth is Lewis Hamilton doing? Now he's back onto the circuit. Well, he's got Vettel now taking 5th place off of him. So, what on earth was all that about for the Red Bull driver? Very briefly, that's moved Kimi Raikkonen up into 4th place. Vettel up to 5th, Hamilton down to 6th, and then who's in 7th? Rubens Barrichello. And off the track goes Ricciardo, smashing into the barrier goes Daniel Ricciardo. He was well out of the points anyway, and that's pretty much just cemented what has been a pretty horrible weekend for the Toro Rosso team. So it could be 15 runners left now, could be 7 retirements, consisting of both Force Indias, both Toro Rossos. That's 4. Jenson Button's into the pits from the race lead. And who else has retired? Montoya has retired, as has Heidfeld, and then Ricciardo. So yep, there's your 7 that have retired from the race. That was Timo Glock, once again making his way ahead of Fernando Alonso. And I think Mark Webber was making his way past Kamui Kobayashi at the same time. Now then, Jenson Button rejoining from his pit stop in 3rd. Very briefly, Matthias Lauda leads the race, as Alonso versus Glock. Take 58. As well, Glock actually staying ahead that time, going into the Adjip curve. And now Matt Webber's right behind this lot as Alonso locks up his tyres quite badly. The grip is quite low because of the rain. And look at the tyres, those are the grooved dry tyres still on the Honda of Takuma Sato. Now the mock tyres has Jenson Button taken on. It's good to get an outboard shot of him to see what he's taken. Sato turns right, then left, and then right again. That must be the Ostkurve chicane. And coming out of it onto the straight approaching the Ayrton Senna chicane. And that's Alonso versus Webber this time. I think Glock is into the pits. And Vettel's into the pits as well. And look at that. Alonso having to go back at Mark Webber at that point. Webber's got ahead, so looking to 6th place. You can see there is still a dry line approaching the Adjip curve, so grip levels are still quite good at that point. But you can see spray pretty much everywhere else. As Alonso versus Webber down the straight approaching the Ostkurve chicane. That's a position retaken from the ballsy Fernando Alonso. Now then, Kimi Raikkonen. He's got the grooved dry tyres on board his McLaren. As Kamui Kobayashi comes into the pits. And what are we looking at here? Is that still Alonso versus Webber? Is it Kobayashi versus Webber going into the Ayrton Senna chicane? So that was a good move from the Japanese driver in the McLaren. We have got both McLarens in the points, 3rd and 7th at this moment. But who knows where they're all going to finish, because we are in the middle of the pit stop window. Turning right into the Adjip curve goes the Toyota of Mark Webber. And then turning left into the hairpin, that is the Sachs curve, with some nice camber on the inside. That's Kobayashi ahead of Webber. And turning right onto the main straight, exiting the Sud curve. Is Webber close enough to have a go into the Nord curve? He's certainly going to have a go. Going into the first corner. I think Kobayashi, yeah, he's hold on to that one, but now he's under pressure, going down the long straight. The current race leader, Matthias Lauda, can't remember if he's led a race before, so if he hasn't, then that's one milestone for himself. But he has got Takuma Sato, just 1.1 seconds behind. Off the track goes Kubica, and nearly making it as far as the tyre barrier, but just about holding on to that one. And he can rejoin, but he's going to rejoin, well, I think he was 11th at one point, but now he's dropped behind Timo Glock. Now he's got a Red Bull approaching him pretty quickly. As through the final corner go the two Hondas, Lauda versus Sato. Interestingly, even though Lauda hasn't made a pit stop, being caught up quite quickly by his own teammate Sato. So it seems as if the new tyres appear to be the bigger factor around Hockenheim. Quite curiously, actually, because there's not really that many in the way of long corners to help with tyre grip. So that's a bit of a curious one, actually. But Sato retaking the lead as he pressured Lauda into taking the outside line at the Nord curve. And it's back to as you were before. Once Matthias Lauda makes a pit stop.
Pit at the end of this lap.
So turning into the Jim Clark chicane goes 3rd place Kimi Raikkonen. On those grooved dry tyres. Alonso into the pits, I think Kobayashi into the pits as well. So that'll move Mark Webber up another couple of positions. And dropping down the order goes Alonso and Kobayashi. As into the Ayrton Senna chicane goes the race leader Matthias Lauda. It's race leader Takuma Sato. Matthias Lauda now in 2nd, having been overtaken by his teammate for the race lead. Could well be some team orders at that point as well. Sergio Perez in 14th place, turning into the Adjip curve, and off the track once again goes Sergio Perez. He's not had a good race in the Ferrari. Rejoins the circuit relatively safely. And since he was down the order quite a bit anyway, he might not have lost a position, but he may well have done if one of those was Jules Bianchi going through. I think it could well have been. Sergio Perez losing a place. And now Jules Bianchi about to go a lap down. So Robert Kubica now in 12th place, under pressure from the Toro Rosso. It's the Red Bull actually. Now, is that the recovering Vettel or is that the recovering Hamilton? Either way, one of the two Red Bulls who has stopped. And somebody else making the pit stop is Kimi Räikkönen, who relinquishes his third place to Jenson Button. And he might relinquish fourth place to Rubens Barrichello as well. Again, that is a storming drive from the Renault driver. And he has made a pit stop as well, so genuine fourth place for the Brazilian. If he can rejoin ahead of Kimi Räikkönen, if Räikkönen rejoins behind him, which he does. Is Kimi going to lose another position? The pit stops do tend to take quite a while. And it's still quite wet approaching the Senna chicane. And it's Sebastian Vettel we're looking at versus Robert Kubica for 12th place. Kubica trying the outside line, going into the Ajip curve, but Vettel just closing the door, just to let him know that you're not coming through there, mate. To maintain 12th place. So, Matthias Lauda now, still yet to make his pit stop, and he's dropping back from race leader Kubica. And off the track goes Jules Bianchi once again, and spinning goes Jules Bianchi. That is at the Ajip Curve gravel trap. And he's got his rear wheels turning now, and he can rejoin. Is he going to lose that place to Sergio Perez, I wonder? Having just taken it from the Mexican on the previous lap, he's going to lose it in exactly the same way. Lauda's into the pits from second place, so he will drop behind Jenson Button because he was. And look at that wheel locking up for Vettel going into the Jim Clark chicane. The question now is that can Lauda rejoin still ahead of Barrichello? I suspect so, because Barrichello was 22 seconds behind Jenson Button, but it'd be remarkable if Rubens somehow manages to get the jump on the Honda driver. And Räikkönen rejoined from his pit stop 4.5 seconds ahead of Mark Webber. And Lauda rejoins in third, and that's a lock-up, and that's an off for Lewis Hamilton. Doesn't make it as far as the tyres, but that's from 7th place, and rejoins still ahead of Nico Hülkenberg, but Hülkenberg now much closer to the Red Bull driver. And I think the rain has stopped again because it's looking quite dry approaching the Nord curve. And it's still quite dry, but it's still a bit wet as the Ost curve, and that is where the rain is coming from. Now I do wonder if it is still raining there, but might not be. It's the Toyota we're looking at the moment of Jenson Button. I think this second sector point is before the Ayrton Senna chicane. Usually it's on the approach to the Ajip curve, but for this variant of Hockenheim it is before the braking zone of the chicane and after the Brazilian legend off the track and smashing into the wall. That's Sebastian Vettel in the Red Bull. So, not even close to making the corner there. It's at the Nord curve. And whereabouts was he? I think he was in 12th place anyway, having not had a particularly good race. Well, he's down to 13th, but he's also out of the race. So another retirement, and that is the 8th of the race. This time it is the home hero Sebastian Vettel in the Red Bull. And we've got just a third of the race to go now. We are now on lap 31 out of 45. There's your second place driver, Jenson Button. 15.5 seconds behind Takuma Sato. And which corner is he approaching? He's going to turn right, and he's going to turn left. That's at the Jim Clark chicane, I think, as Lewis Hamilton. Now, he went off on the previous lap at this corner here. No such problems this time around, and he has still got Nico Hülkenberg behind him. This is the battle for 7th. How far behind Mark Webber is Lewis Hamilton? 8.3 seconds, and Webber 5.3 seconds behind 5th placed Kimi Räikkönen. And Räikkönen, how far is he behind Rubens Barrichello? And that's a front wing gone for Takuma Sato. What on earth has happened to him? As off the track goes Kamui Kobayashi. Now, what on earth has happened to Sato? Has he gone off somewhere? Because now Jenson Button just 7.8 seconds behind the Japanese driver, who must surely come into the pits. So we have now got drama pretty much at 2/3 distance, and we're going to have a new race leader in the next few seconds or so. That's Jenson Button next in the Ajip curve, and now into the Sachs curve goes the Brit, 2-time race winner already, through the pit path and then turn right. That's Sato in front of him, and that's Sato coming into the pits for some repairs on his front wing. So what has happened to him? Goodness me. This is a battle between Ferrari and Alonso. That's the battle for 9th between Glock and Alonso. Now where on earth is Sato going to rejoin, having needing to repair his front wing damage? It wasn't just a bit of his front wing as well, that was all of it. So, Now then, I am wondering actually, was it off the back of Sebastian Vettel's crash at the Nord curve? Because the gap at the start of the lap was 15.5 seconds. Now, if a wheel has come onto the circuit at that point, then Sato could well have hit it, and with the first sector point being before the Jim Clark, he had lost 2 seconds at that point. I think Sato has hit an errant wheel, and of the errant wheel of Sebastian Vettel's crashed car. I suspect that's what's happened. So, Sato has rejoined, still in 3rd place. And he's 4.7 seconds behind the 2nd place driver, Matthias Lauda. And wouldn't that be a result for him? Lauda some 19.2 seconds behind race leader Jenson Button. And that's your 3rd place driver Sato. Still on the grooved dry tyres, so the track getting drier now, and no driver needing full wets at this stage. And Sato only just rejoined ahead of Rubens Barrichello as well, so that was a fairly crucial one for the Japanese driver, as he remains in the podium place, but it could so have easily been a win. So there's a little bit of deja vu in terms of race leaders hitting spots of trouble, as it's happened to Mark Webber twice this season already, at Melbourne and at Suzuka. To a certain extent it happened to Fernando Alonso as well, although that was a big mechanical problem in the form of a blown Cosworth engine. And then, yeah, so 3 out of 5 races now, the race leader has hit some trouble. And just keeping an eye on some more gaps. Kimi Räikkönen back into the pits. So that sounds like a mechanical issue for the McLaren driver. That's going to put Mark Webber up into 5th place, Lewis Hamilton up to 6th. That's going to put Nico Hülkenberg up to 7th as well. So, very untimely issue for Kimi Räikkönen, just appearing there on, that would have been his 32nd lap. Could have been his 31st lap actually. No, I think it was his 32nd lap. Anyway, so here's Takuma Sato, and he's already pulling away from Rubens Barrichello, probably on his new tyres, and just 3.9 seconds behind Matthias Lauda. So pretty sure that Sato will catch up and pass Matthias Lauda for 2nd before the end of the race. Raikkonen's rejoined in 8th place. That's behind the... Well, it was a battling Hamilton and Hülkenberg, but now Hamilton's stretching the gap between himself and the BMW Sauber driver. 2.5 seconds now, so Hamilton just getting the measure now and looking a bit comfortable as a lock-up. That's on the out lap is Kimi Räikkönen, so a bit angry after a mechanical drama. Same thing happened to him at Adelaide as well, so Räikkönen not having the best of luck in terms of mechanical issues mid-race. Then again, he has had a decent season so far with a 4th, a 2nd and a 3rd so far, and he sits on 45 points, 6 behind race leader championship leader Mark Webber. There he is, he's going off the circuit, and he's going to smash, he is! Smashing out of the race from 5th place goes Mark Webber. So that's going to move Hamilton up to 5th, Hülkenberg up to 6th. So, damp track catching out yet more drivers, and this time it's the championship leader. Hasn't had the greatest of races anyway, but still from 5th place that's useful points gone. As they wheel the Toyota into some sort of safety. Now he's being craned away to the right over the barriers, and now they're safe to race again. Withdrawn now the yellow flags. Green, green, green. And speaking of green, it's a bit of a terrible livery on that Honda, but anyway. Through the greenery of the 3rd long straight, Into the Ayrton Senna chicane goes Takuma Sato, and it's catching up to Lauda very quickly. 2.8 seconds the gap as they crossed the second sector point. As we go on board with race leader Jenson Button, pretty much will be 20 seconds in the lead once Matthias Lauda completes this lap. And not long to go now, we've only got 11 laps to go, as Jenson tries to get into the slipstream of the lapped Super Aguri in front of him. And Barrichello! Oh, that was lucky. That was lucky for Rubens Barrichello. He gave that barrier a more mighty wallop, and somehow he's gotten away with it. So, big scare for the Renault driver. And living for another day. Kubica also had an off, so they built the Renaults quite robustly. But how much time has that lost him compared to Lewis Hamilton? That lost him about 8 seconds. And it was a mistake that he didn't really need to make, but he's gotten away with it. As we look at Matthias Lauda, and behind him is his own teammate, Takuma Sato. How long will it be before Sato breezes past the Austrian? Probably at this rate, within the next 2 laps. Sato has been catching up very quickly to the back of the Austrian. Just seeing if there's any other potential battles on the circuit. I think Glock versus Alonso is still at large. Gap between those two is just half a second as Perez locks up his wheels quite badly going into the Sachs curve. Who's he got behind him? Well, let's see him turn through these Sud curves. That's the lapped Super Aguri of Felipe Massa behind him. So that's 12th and 13th places. And Jenson Button putting that lap on Felipe Massa now, going into the Nord curve. On board with the Brazilian. Now then, is he going to prove himself to be a pain in the arse as he gets into the slipstream of the Toyota in front of him? Well, the slipstream is working, and what's he going to do here? He's going to close up a little bit more. Is he going to try and get that lap back going into the Jim Clark chicane? No, he plays it sensible. And zooming through the Nord curve goes Takuma Sato, as he is now 1.4 seconds behind his teammate. Massa is going to try and get that lap back off of Jenson Button going into the Est curve. For whatever reason, Massa is determined not to be a lap down, but he's backed out of that one under the braking zone. And now Jenson Button has got a bit of breathing space as he approaches the Ferrari in front of him. That is Sergio Perez. Turning into the Ajit curve, and off the track goes Robert Kubica for yet another excursion, but he keeps it pointing in the right direction this time as he rejoins the circuit. And turning into the Sachs curve goes the Renault. Would like to have a look at the 8th place battle, because that is just 4/10 of a second between Glock and Alonso. And that could be important points for one of those two. Alonso still doesn't have any points this season, so yeah, if he gets a few more, that will do his confidence a lot of good. Because he's one of 2 drivers yet to score a point this season, the other being Paul Di Resta. And with Di Resta out of the race on the first lap, he's going to have to wait his turn. Did come close actually, did Di Resta on the previous race. He was closing in on Montoya quite quickly for the final points, but not enough laps in the end for the Toro Rosso driver. And Montoya got to keep that point. That point did give him a boost for this race in terms of his qualifying performance, utilising his soft tyres quite well, and BMW Sauber's engine upgrade tokens that they've used for before Sepang it was. It didn't quite work out as he'd hoped in the race, having crashed out. His teammate's not doing too badly though, he's in 6th place. Nico Hulkenberg once again having a pretty good drive, and he qualified quite a way down the order as well, I think somewhere down in 18th place. It was 18th place, that was a good guess. And now he's up in 6th. Certainly not as impressive as Rubens Barrichello though, from 22nd up to 4th at this stage of the race. And who knows, if something happens between the top three, then Barrichello could get a podium place. That something could happen between Lauda and Sato. They are now separated by just 0.4 of a second. As we look at Robert Kubica, the overhead shot, he's some 20 seconds behind Kamui Kobayashi now. And Jenson Button puts a lap on Sergio Perez going into the Nord curve. Just 8 laps to go now. And, is Perez going to have a go back at Jenson to try and retake that lap? We'll find out later as the two Hondas are about to go into combat with each other for second place. Now that this is more of a genuine battle on the track, Lauda could battle this one a little bit harder, but Takuma Sato is the main driver, so Honda would prefer the two not to battle, and would prefer Sato to limit the damage to that driver there, Jenson Button, as Button is leading the race and ahead of Sato in the championship at the moment. So extra points would help Sato's Drivers' Championship cause. I think Jenson's just exiting the Ostkurve chicane. Now he's approaching the Ayrton Senna chicane. Wait about 12 seconds from exiting the Ostkurve as he brakes hard just about there and hits the first apex. And now he switched to Takuma Sato. Now he switched to his teammate. And is the overtake going to happen this time around, I wonder, because Sato is now up the inside, which will be the inside going into the Senna chicane. He is on the damp part of the circuit, but his tyres are nice and hot, so he can brake pretty much late, but Lauda's hanging on, so that dry line really helping the Austrian at that point. Now then, Sato's going to have to try again. Keep an eye on the timing screens as we watch Jenson Button complete another lap. Got some distance between himself and Sergio Perez. And into the Nord curve goes Jenson Button. Lap 39 now. We'll do a quick recap of the race order of the top 11, because we have got Jenson Button leading by 20 seconds from Matthias Lauda. Sato, the gap is pretty much nothing between those two. Rubens Barrichello in 4th place for Renault. Hamilton 5th for the Red Bull. Then Nico Hülkenberg as Sato having a look at the inside going into the Nord curve. Not making that one work, so Lauda's putting up a stern defence. Nico Hülkenberg 6th. Now here comes Takuma Sato on Matthias Lauda, approaching the Jim Clark chicane as Jenson Button brakes hard for the Ostkurve. No lockups and turning in nicely. His car's working pretty well at this stage of the race. So Sato now up to 2nd place, but Lauda not giving up. As he goes up the inside now, approaching the Ostkurve. Now he's got the damp line, but Sato's got the overlap, so if he can brake late, then he should maintain a position ahead of Lauda, who locks up. That could have been dodgy for the Honda team, but as it is, Sato holding on to 2nd place. Now how far back is Matthias Lauda? We'll keep an eye out on this shot, because they usually overtake at the inside going into the Senna chicane, which will be Sato's left-hand side, but I don't think Lauda's close enough. So Sato's got it pretty much safe now. As of the rest of the top 11, Hülkenberg 6th, Raikkonen in 7th for McLaren, despite that mid-race mechanical pit stop on around lap 31. Timo Glock still versus Fernando Alonso for 8th place. And then Kamui Kobayashi in 10th, so we have got both McLarens in the top 10. Robert Kubica in 11th place, but that's 22 seconds behind Kobayashi's. Jules Bianchi running in 14th and last place of the remaining runners. Locking up a bit going into the sud curve, and he's some 22 seconds behind Felipe Massa, so quite a lonely drive for Jules Bianchi at this point of the race. Got the two Hondas in front of him, but they're a lap ahead. So Massa in 13th place, Perez in 12th place. That's pretty much it for the remaining runners. And just to recap the retirements, both Toro Rossos, I think, both Toro Rossos out of the race. Both Force Indias out of the race. That's 4, and then you've got Montoya out of the race. And then a few more retirements as well. Mark Webber out of the race, that is 6. Who else is retired? Nick Heidfeld out of the race, that is 7. And then one more, Sebastian Vettel, that's your 8th retirement. And we haven't got long to go now, 5 laps to go. once Jenson Button crosses the line shortly. But let's have a look at Glock versus Alonso for 8th place going into the Jim Clark chicane. And then let's switch to Matthias Lauda for, it's in 3rd place at the moment. I think Glock is maintaining that edge over Fernando Alonso, so he's still in 8th place. Now Jenson Button crosses the line and begins lap 41. Just 5 laps to go, and what has been a race that has flown by. Usually does at Hockenheim. The races take about an hour and 20 minutes. Not too dissimilar to that of Monza. As Sato crosses the line to start, his 5 laps to go, and setting a new fastest lap in the process. Less than 1 minute 40, Barrichello locking up, and he's going to go off again at the sud curve. So he's finding the handling a little bit tricky on his Renault, and he's stopped a bit because Hamilton is close. There goes Lewis Hamilton up into 4th place, and Rubens Barrichello rejoins in 5th. Quite some way, oh well, he's sort of rejoining in 5th, but he decided to taste a bit of gravel a bit more. Now Nico Hülkenberg is quite close, and he's taken 5th place, so a very clumsy mistake for the Renault of Rubens Barrichello, and that's put Kimi Raikkonen now up to 6th place as well. So maybe a damp patch catching out Rubens Barrichello again, just like before at the sub curve a few laps before. So, well, we've still got a Renault in the points, but they would have preferred 4th place rather than 7th place. And Hülkenberg and Raikkonen doing battle. That's for 5th place now. So Hülkenberg was delayed a little bit, but now Glock versus Alonso once again. This is approaching the Jim Clark chicane. And once again, Alonso can't manage it. The Ferrari is quite good in a straight line, or the Cosworth engine is not as good. 3rd place Lauda turning into the Ajip curve. No such problems for the Austrian. And we could be seeing two Hondas on the podium. Now Alonso's got a much better run going into the Ost curve, but Glock quite late on the brakes. And still side by side, but Alonso's got it this time. That's 8th place for Alonso. And potentially looks as if he's going to score his first points of the season. Another new fastest lap for Takuma Sato as the track continues to dry out. And Raikkonen had made that overtake on Hülkenberg's stick for 5th place. So a decent recovery after that unscheduled stop for Raikkonen. And once again, it looks as if he's going to get some solid points. But if it stays like this, it will be Jenson Button retaking the lead of the Drivers' Championship. By quite some way over his teammate, but I think Takuma Sato will be moving up into 2nd in the Championship. Then who's going to take 3rd in the Championship? I think Kimi Raikkonen is actually going to take 3rd in the... Oh, off the track goes Alonso. Is that the Nord curve? We can see a bit of bouncing as he loses that place to Glock and also to Kobayashi. Barrichello's into the pits. That is unscheduled. So Renault might not score points after all. Well, Kubica could still take 10th, but wow, that is tragic for Barrichello, who had been running brilliantly up in 4th place for much of the race. It is Jenson Button. Is he going to put a lap on Kubica? I think that is. Well, Barrichello's exited the pits, so he's still in 10th, but, well, Renault's race starting to fall apart in the closing stages. There goes Barrichello exiting the shot as Kubica is about to go a lap down. Probably on this lap, but on the straight approaching, let's say the straight approaching the Ayrton Senna chicane. Once again, a new fastest lap, a 1:39.2 for Takuma Sato. But I think it's just about having fun now in the closing stages. But then again, Sato, well, could have won the race, but for hitting the errant wheel of Sebastian Vettel when the German crashed out. So he can consider himself a bit unfortunate, can Sato, to lose this race win. So that driver there, Jenson Button, he's got 2.5 laps to go now. And he's pretty much right behind Robert Kubica. Might not get him into the Ayrton Senna chicane, might well be at the Ajip curve. But turning left, right, and then accelerating out of the brief left, now onto the final long straight. The shortest of the 4 long straights. And here comes the lap. Jenson Button takes Robert Kubica. and has enough time to go back onto the racing line before turning into the Agip curve. Now into the Sachs curve. Both drivers play it pretty sensibly, no lockups, as Matthias Lauda goes through the Ayrton Senna chicane. And he's 3.9 seconds behind his teammate Takuma Sato, but a good drive from Lauda. Good start, moving into second in the early stages. Didn't have the pace compared to Jensen and Takuma, but has pretty much stayed there off his own merit and looks good to take a podium finish. That'll do Honda's Constructors' Championship quite a bit of good, given 33 points compared to Toyota's 25, so they'll close the gap and may well jump McLaren in the Constructors' Championship as well. I might just double check that actually, but let's see Sergio Perez having a bit of turning issues as he goes through Dean Clark chicane, but ultimately no issues, or no major problem. As he's been passed by Felipe Massa actually, going into the Ost curve, so Massa moving up to 12th place. Honda sit 13 points behind McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. Honda currently on 33 points. McLaren, what are they on? They're on 10 with Raikkonen and number 4 for Camille Kobayashi. That'll give them 14 points. Yep, Honda will jump McLaren for second in the Constructors' Championship. But they'll be somewhere behind Honda. But it should be Jenson Button leading the championship at this once the race finishes. Should be a 16-point lead over Takuma Sato. Button would be on 75, Sato will be on 59. Kimi Raikkonen will be on 55, and Mark Webber will be on 51. And no chance of adding his points tally because he is out the race. Kobayashi actually has just taken Timo Glock for 7th place. So, let me recalculate the Constructors' points because McLaren will be getting 16 points compared to Honda's 33. Honda will still jump them, but not as much as the previous lap. And Jensen's got about 2/3 of the lap remaining now. He's approaching the Ost curve. And Sato has been closing the gap, but the gap is still 18.1 seconds as they cross the first sector point. There's Lauda in 3rd place, turning right, left, then accelerating out. Right, rejoining back onto the long straight, which is punctuated by that very chicane. There is a new 7th place driver locking up going into the Sachs curve, Kamui Kobayashi. Still doing a pretty good job for McLaren. He scored points in Adelaide and also at Suzuka. Now he looks on course to score some more points at Hockenheim, so he's had a pretty good season, I think. But someone who is having a good season of his own for different reasons is Jenson Button. Has got 2 wins already. They were at Suzuka and in Melbourne, and that was rounds 1 and 3. And now round 5 has come along, and he's going to take his 3rd win of the season. Jenson Button wins for Toyota. Now we'll keep an eye out on the remaining finishers. Kubica, that's him rated in 11th place. So looks as if the top 10 will all be as they are. The top 10 will score points in whatever order they find themselves in. Takuma Sato comes home in 2nd and sets the fastest lap on the final lap. So, at least he gets, well, bragging rights for having the fastest lap. But there is Matthias Lauda, and that is his first career podium. Well done, Matthias. And we got some yellow flags out. Hamilton spun out at the Agip curve. Now that's going to put Kimi Raikkonen up into 4th, so Hamilton making a dreadful mistake. Well, dreadful enough that he'll lose 4th place. Just 1 position, but here comes Kimi Raikkonen. That'll be a welcome boost for himself. So, I've got to recalculate that once again, but I think 18 points, Honda would still jump McLaren, but again, not by as much as before. So, Raikkonen 4th, Hamilton just ahead of Nico Hülkenberg in 5th, Hülkenberg 6th, and Kobayashi coming home in 7th place. More points for the Japanese driver. And then completing the remaining runners, Timo Glock in 8th, Fernando Alonso, there he is in 9th. And then the last remaining runner to cross the line, there he is, Paul Rubens Barrichello. Could have been in 4th place, then dropped down to 7th, and then ultimately dropped down to 10th with a late pit stop. That's unfortunate. So that was the first race of the European season. Now we go from Germany to a little principality somewhere in the French Riviera, specifically Monaco, for the Monaco Grand Prix. So, we shall see you then.